and I liked lots of lo-fi music and lots of ambient music. So for me, when someone like Earl Sweatshirt released an album like I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, which is like the most depressing shit in the world, it was just, I was like, this is dank. I really like this. This is, I mean, it's real, it's emotional. When you listen to something like Earl Sweatshirt and he talks about a track like DNA and he's talking about his friend dying, and then the person that was actually Nakel, who was the person who features on it, who Earl hands him a notepad and says, you got to write this down while the wound's fresh. Like, you can't go out and write something lyrically at all or rap it unless you have something to say, and that's part of hip-hop culture. Start from the top.
What's your name?
I am Nate. I am a student. I'm a videographer and a photographer from Melbourne, Australia. And I work under NS Photo Video, and I study at RMIT University.
This kid. So,
I work for Ezra Allen as his photographer and videographer for promotional purposes.
how do you know me?
I met...
You can elaborate, like you're allowed to elaborate this one.
I don't want to go on tangents.
You can do it.
I've already got 10 minutes of tangent footage from you in between questions.
3 times?
Yeah. I met... Can I say your actual name? Because I keep almost saying Scott.
No, I'm saying Ezra. This is going on Ezra.
I met Ezra through Michael McCaffrey, who I went to high school with. He's a graphic designer from Melbourne as well. I put him onto a job and I said, oh, you should, they're doing internship jobs at this place, you should go there. And he got the job and it was awesome and I was stoked for him. And then he went, he said, I'll return the favor and I've got a job for you. And I went, oh, what's the job? And he went, oh, I know this guy and he's a rapper and he's looking for some promotional work. And I expected this guy, like I showed up and was like, right, give me his contact, cool, I'll get it done. Had a bit of spare time in between uni, we're on a mid-semester break. And I expected to speak to this guy, just like I imagined him as I was speaking to him on the phone, like, oh, this will be a guy that's got like, you know, Supreme outfit and is wearing like Jordans or something like the ridiculous, and he's got like a snapback or has a seedy mustache and something to do with Fitzroy. And I showed up and I was like sitting at the Sunmoth Cafe waiting for this guy, and I was sort of like looking around with my gear, not really knowing who I was waiting for. And then this guy in a tan jacket with ginger hair and like a cute little smile walks up to me with a friendly face and walks up to me and goes, oh, hey, I'm Ezra Allen. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I went, okay, let's get started. So we did that photo shoot and the rest is history. And then from there, I have shot some more promotional footage for him for his first headline show, and I've also shot some more footage. I'm currently working on a documentary through a Folio series through RMIT, and that's going to be called Real People, and that will be available to look at in late November at RMIT.
Such a self-plug. What happened to that shoot?
On the photo shoot?
Yeah.
Oh, we're at the cafe and we're shooting out in the alleyway because it's some really lovely light, and I really loved the light that was going on there. It was just a really nice atmosphere because he said he wanted urban. And outside there was the owner of Sunmoth walked out, this guy named Luke, and he was taking photos on his phones really awkwardly, struggling, holding his hand and like overexposing it with his iPhone 6. Well, I'm answering the question. Okay. So back in shot. So this guy was struggling with it and I walked up to him and I was like, hi, my name's Nate. I'm a photographer. Do you need help? And he went, great, sure. And I took a photo and I sent it to my Sony, well, from my Sony rather, to my phone with this Sony Play Memories app. And I was like, great, what's your Facebook? And he's like, oh, it's just this. So I sent him the link from Google Drive immediately, did a quick process, and he was happy with it. And then he was like, oh, would you be interested in doing more of this on sort of a more permanent residence? And I was like, sure. I just took one photo and then I took a few more things before we moved on, and it took me like 5 minutes and we just kept moving on. It was just as we were leaving the cafe and we're like, oh, this turned from, you know, this light outside the cafe is really nice to getting a cafe food shoot job for social media in the middle of a rap shoot. And
he got free food and free drink because of me. Basically,
I still get free coffee and free food. Shout out.
Wait, where?
Sunmoth. Shout outs to Luke.
All right. So outside of photography, what are your interests?
I play music, and I used to, when I was from the age of about my entire family, okay, I'll start from the start. My entire family are musicians. My mum was a trained opera singer. She's classically trained, and then she didn't pursue that as much and became an opera singer. My dad, on the other hand, toured America, and he's played in a band called PR. They got signed to Universal Records, and then later on, sort of after that, some things happened and they disbanded. But after that, my dad still plays music, and when I was a kid, he just gave me my first cut. When I was a kid, he just sort of forced music upon me. He'd just like be in the car, like sort of just looking at me really weirdly when I was like 4, like playing Black Sabbath, like just blasting Paranoid, and he'd like drop me off at school. Best parent ever. And just like all my teachers would be like horrified because it was like a Christian school, and he'd be there like blasting Black Sabbath out of his car and he'd be like, bye, and I'd be like, oh, see you. So how would I not want to play music? You know, I show up to school every day listening to like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and all sorts of stuff like that. And my dad would just dance like an idiot, and I was like, oh, I'll just dance like an idiot at school and like do whatever that was. Kids just didn't get it. I was sort of always the odd one out there. So what better way to feel like I belonged anywhere than through music and anything creative? So when I developed this passion for photography, in the middle of me playing music with my brother and playing local venues and touring, or just doing interstate stuff when I was younger, I developed this passion for, you know, why don't I make these two things and make them coexist? Because there were people that were doing it, you know, like there's drummers from overseas and they play in bands, but then they might come home and have spare time and they do graphic design and they might work for other bands, and then from there they're like, oh, corporate businesses got interested in what they were doing. So I thought, why can't I base my life around making these two things coexist? They're both creative. You're going to have time for both of these things. So what's to say I can't do it? Who's to say that I can't make these two things exist together? So there was a point in time when I left high school and I was playing in a band, and I started working for other bands, and it was just like, and someone, you know, puts it in your face in careers and goes, what do you want to do? And I was in the middle of doing a year 12 folio, and I just said, I want to play music and I want to show my passion for music and project other people's passion for music through photographs and through video and whatever else I could do.
What was your experience with rap before this?
I partook. I like rap artists. I didn't have an appreciation for, I think there's a lot of rappers and there's a lot of artists that do hip hop, and there's a lot of genres I've worked in, whether it's metal bands and things, like a genre called metalcore or rock and roll music, there's a lot of saturation. And sometimes through all that saturation, people listen to stuff and think that's just another artist. And so through that, it's hard to find artists that really have potential, or to find artists that already have the potential. But for the ones that have potential, to truly unlock that, whether it be through marketing or there's just something that having struggle with production and they might need to work with a producer or something like that. The rap artists I listen to a lot of Earl Sweatshirt, I listen to a lot of Mortal Technique, I listened to a lot of NWA, I listened to a lot of Biggie Smalls, so Notorious Big, you can't really go past that. I listened to, from there I got into a lot of darker stuff. I was in this weird sort of stage in between. I listened to heaps of grunge, and I liked lots of lo-fi music and lots of ambient music. So for me, when someone like Earl Sweatshirt released an album like I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, which is like the most depressing shit in the world, it was just, I was like, this is dank, I really like this. This is, I mean, it's real, it's emotional. When you listen to something like Earl Sweatshirt and he talks about a track like DNA and he's talking about his friend dying, and then the person that was actually Nakel, who was the person who features on it, who Earl hands him a notepad and says, you got to write this down while the wound's fresh. Like, you can't go out and write something lyrically at all or rap it unless you have something to say, and that's part of hip hop culture. You can't go out and just spout shit unless you have something to say, unless you have a message. And that's why a lot of rappers have such an affinity against pop music and regular pop culture, is because they don't have a lot to say. They're talking about the same stuff, you know, they're talking about grinding on each other in the club, they're talking about all that regular crap that's not real. And there's a few artists there that really are great, and they're talking about real things and they've got something to say, but for the most part, I feel like hip hop is really embedded in that. And why I like Ezra is because he's talking about personal growth, he's talking about real things, he's got something to say, whether it's what's the norm in hip hop or not. It's soulful. It's really, he's talking about people struggling with not fitting in, growing as a person, not understanding who they are or trying to figure out who the hell they are. And I feel like there's a lot of artists that could really concentrate on that, and there's a lot of area for growth.
Cool.